Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. I've spent the last couple of weekends acquainting myself with the Blind Dead movies, 4 movies written and directed by Amando de Ossorio. I have a real gap in my horror knowledge when it comes to Spanish horror, so maybe you can suggest some. For example, which of the Squintillion Paul Naschy werewolf movies should I watch? But I've plugged the gap with the Blind Dead movies now, and I'm really glad I have. They're all clearly low budget, they're all clearly made with a lot of heart, they're of varying quality, but all of them are backed up with an absolute powerhouse of a concept: zombie Templar knights. Within these movies, the idea is that the Order of Knights Templar during the Crusades turned to occult worship and Satanism in order to achieve immortality through human sacrifice, and now, centuries later, they return as revenants, sort of mummified zombies. They ride zombie horses to claim more victims, to continue their life beyond the grave, such as it is. The idea is absolutely bulletproof. The execution, through the limitations, is patchy. The series starts with Tombs of the Blind Dead and revolves around an abandoned medieval town which sits on the border between Spain and Portugal. It's set in the present day, although we do get flashbacks to one Templar sacrifice back when they were still human, just to give us a flavour of how evil they were. But here in the present day, we have a meet cute between 2 old school friends. There's Betty meets Virginia and Virginia's current boyfriend, Roger. And Roger kind of takes a shine to Betty and invites her along on this train journey with them. And Virginia takes exception to this. There's a bit of a weird, sleazy potential triangle going on. And Virginia decides to just jump the train. She jumps off and walks to this town that she can see in the distance. Unbeknownst to her, it's this abandoned medieval town, and she spends the night there, and lo and behold, out of the graves come the Templars. After Virginia fails to return, Roger and Betty go and investigate her disappearance. They try and get help from the police. They try and get help from a local criminal gang. Virginia's body is found and taken back to the city in the morgue. She reanimates in a spookily, wonderfully eerie scene where she returns to her place of work that's full of these mannequins and really expressive flashing neon light all over the place. You know, the kind of lighting that Dario Argento fans love. I found it really amusing that this is to my knowledge the only film with that kind of expressionistic lighting that attempts to explain where this lighting is possibly coming from. Someone asks about it and the girl who works there says, "Oh, it's coming in through the skylight. There's a neon factory in the floor above us." So there you go. Anyway, the idea of the Knights Templar is that after they were hanged in this movie, their eyes were plucked out by crows, and so when they return from the dead, they're blind. They are the blind dead, and they track you by sound. A little bit is made about the sound thing, not too much. Really, the strength of the film for me is the lashings of gothic sensibility whenever the blind dead are on the screen. Anytime they ride their horses, it's in glorious slow motion. The sets are fog bound. The place that they shoot looks nicely gothic. That is rubbing up against the sort of modern day sensibilities of the modern day stuff. Sometimes they don't make excellent bedfellows in any movie in this series, perhaps barring the last one. But the film ends on a real high note and is a really exciting first entry into the series. The next film is called Return of the Blind Dead, or it's also known as Return of the Evil Dead, which I find really interesting because this film feels to the first one in the same way that Evil Dead 2 feels to the first Evil Dead movie, in that it's kind of a remake, kind of a sequel. We start in flashback this time and we see the Templars getting blinded by fire before being burned alive by the the townsfolk who have turned on them. So in this version, they're blinded slightly differently, but we jump forward 500 years to where a local town is having an anniversary celebration of that event and burning effigies of the Knights Templar, despite this 500-year-old prophecy that they will return. Our hero is a character called Jack, who has the fantastic line of dialogue along the lines of, I used to be a Navy captain, but now I organise firework displays. The mayor of the town has asked him to come and organise a firework display for the celebrations. Or rather, his fiancée has, because those two have a history and she wants to try and rekindle it behind the mayor's back. So there's another sort of love triangle-y thing going on. But long story short, the Templars get resurrected and come and besiege the town. It treads a lot of similar ground to the first movie, but bigger and a little bit better, I think. The characters work with each other more. There are more characters to play off. The siege situation in the town, I think, works really well. And the creepily gothic Templar zombies work like absolute gangbusters. Some of the footage in the first film of them is so good that you will find it reused in this film and in the fourth film. Why not? I guess budgets being so small, you want to cut as many financial corners as you can, so you will see an awful lot of reused footage, but the look of the zombies in all of these movies, I think, is spectacular. Yes, at times they look like human-sized marionettes. Their hands are sort of withered, shrunken, mummified claws, so there's no mobility in their hands. So again, that gives them a sort of marionette feel. The skull masks all look excellent, like sort of shrunken, withered, mummified faces. So that sort of puppeteering aspect, to me, yeah, some people might say it looks a little bit hokey, but it just adds slightly to me to the uncanny vibe of these slow-moving, weird revenants. The third film is The Ghost Galleon, and it is easily the weakest of the three. I suspect that is because, for the most part, it's shot on a recreation of a galleon ship set, which isn't that great, and by all accounts wasn't even a complete galleon set. They just had half a ship to work with and shoot around with angles and things like that to make it look larger than it was. And what they are missing is the old and crumbling architecture from abandoned villages and things like that, and crumbling churches that Ossorio uses to such excellent effect in the first, second and third movies. Here also the setup is the weakest. We have a pair of swimsuit models who have secretly agreed to go out on the water in a boat and pretend to be stranded at sea as some sort of publicity stunt, but the businessman who's organising the stunt has kept it so hush-hush that one of the model's friends thinks she's disappeared, and she follows the lady who runs the modelling agency back to his base of operations, and they kidnap her so that she doesn't spill the beans on the publicity stunt. To be honest, it's all an absolute load of nonsense. It's an excuse to get two pretty young ladies on the Ghost Galleon at the start of the movie and send a boat full of people out onto the water to look for them, and then find themselves on the Ghost Galleon a little bit later on. Whilst I guess the limited location could have been a way to bring about a sense of claustrophobia and suspense, what it really gives us is a crushing sense of monotonous repetition. I really didn't get on with this one. It didn't reach any of the heights of the first two, save for one really effective sequence when the friend in the second boat decides that not enough is being done to look for these two missing models. As in, they get on the boat and no one goes and looks for them. She decides to go off on her own at night and go searching. And as you would expect, she comes a cropper of the Knights Templar who wound her throat so that she can't scream. And there's a fantastic sort of drawn out sequence, almost in silence, where these slow moving zombie knights drag her back down below decks and into the room where they want to kill her, with her unable to scream, and the only sounds we have are sort of the Foley effects, the sounds of their feet on the rotten wooden boards and the rustling of their rotten cloaks and garments and stuff like that, and just having any kind of soundtrack music completely drop out, and it just being the ambient sound of the action around it is really creepy and effective. But that's really that, and a final shot that I think is nicely creepily effective, are about the only two good things about it. And if you push for time, I would actually say you could skip this one and jump straight to the fourth and final film, which is Night of the Seagulls, and in my humble opinion, the best of the bunch. It takes some inspiration from the works of H.P. Lovecraft and weaves them into this world and mythology that Ossorio has already created. So now we find our revenant Knights Templar besieging a strange and crumbling rundown seaside town, a sort of fishing village. We start again in flashback to see our Templars as humans grabbing people off the road, dragging them back to their castle and performing human sacrifice for their own nefarious ends, this time taking the heart of their victim and putting it in the mouth of a large idol that they worship, which is that of a sort of amphibious humanoid kind of deity. So already Lovecraftian vibes here. Then we jump back to the present and follow a doctor and his wife who are newly arrived at the town. As with a lot of Lovecraft stories, the locals there are strange. They don't trust the new doctor. Something's going on. There's a bell ringing at night. They can hear chanting. There's a procession or some kind of ceremony that occurs nightly down on the beach. Something strange is going on, and young ladies are disappearing. It turns out, in another little twist to the mythology, there's no consistency to the Templars' mythology, but that doesn't really seem to matter. In this version, the Templars return every 7 years. They come back for 7 nights and expect 7 sacrifices, otherwise they'll kill everyone in the town. So against a backdrop of suspicious and antagonistic locals, first the doctor's wife is certain that something's going on and he poo-poos the idea until he can ignore it no longer, and then they have to find themselves investigating and becoming embroiled in this tale of nightly human sacrifice and Templar knights that are risen from the ground. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic, easily the best of the bunch. The only real low spot for me is the third one, and I was super delighted to see the series end on what I thought was a brilliant high. So I'm glad I've finally gotten around to watching the Blind Dead movies. I do understand that other people subsequently have taken up the mantle, and there are other Blind Dead movies out there that aren't by its original creator. I'm interested to know if any of you have seen them and would recommend them, because one of the things that I don't think was made enough of this superb concept was the idea that they can't see and that they hunt by sound. It was made the most of in the second film, where the scumbag mayor uses a little girl as a sort of sound decoy so he can try and escape, but there's never really any sort of sequences that really hinge on the fact that these creatures hunt by sound alone. And in an age where we have 2, soon to be 3 Quiet Place movies and things like that, I really think the idea of trying to survive by being quiet is a recipe for some really exciting scenarios that these original movies, because of budget and time constraints, didn't have time to explore. There's an excellent sequence in the first film where they track one of the women by the sound of her racing heartbeat, but there's definitely more juice to get out of this fantastic idea. So if other later versions of the Blind Dead movies are worth watching, please let me know. But yeah, these are shaky, shonky, gothic treats with just enough atmosphere in them to make them worthwhile, if you like your old school horror movies with fog-bound sets and zombies coming out of the ground, really insulated by an absolutely dynamite concept.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.